What is it that's dividing families more than usual?
Definitely gender roles, all sorts of conflict about things like in-laws and money and all of that stuff.
What do you see happening with families? Better, worse?
I see so much awareness. There are husbands and dads who want to actually be present fathers, who want to be present, loving husbands. And they don't know. They don't know how to do it, but they want to do it. And they come in and I can give them feedback.
The message in the past, with therapy especially, unfortunately our field, was, look, there's something wrong with you, you need to fix it, and you are hurting other people.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think a way that therapy has missed the mark for men historically is that it has not put forth enough the fact that there's solutions, and it's seemed very touchy-feely.
Welcome back to the I Wish You Knew podcast. I'm your host, Adam Lane Smith. Why are so many marriages headed for total destruction, especially when they don't seem like they have to be headed for divorce, but they are headed there at maximum speed? That's exactly the question that we brought Elizabeth Earnshaw on today to talk about. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, the same as I used to be for many, many years. Today, we're going to talk shop. We are also going to reveal for you exactly the number one deadly issue that is causing so many divorces today. She's the author of a groundbreaking book and an upcoming book on exactly why marriages are falling apart, and I'm excited for this conversation. Elizabeth, the reason that I really wanted you on this show, and the reason I've been excited for this conversation is, number one, I love talking to colleagues and marriage and family therapists because that's what I did for a long time. But what I've really noticed about you and what I've really loved about your work is that you help families who are in realistic situations. You help families who are busy, who are stressed. You help families that don't have the ideal conditions to just spend 8 hours a day holding each other and talking about how much they love each other, right? All of those challenges. Can you lead us in by telling us what you wish people knew about building a loving family connection, even during difficult, challenging times?
I wish people knew that everyone faces challenging times and that it's usually kind of messy behind the scenes, and that no matter how many books you read, no matter how much you know about it, it's still going to be challenging, and that you just really have to try your best, but that it's not always going to be perfect.
Right. And when it's not perfect, obviously you need a professional to sometimes come in and help, and that's what you and I both do in those areas. What are some of the major challenges that you see main families facing nowadays? You know, mom's facing this, dad is facing this, kids are dealing with this. What is it that's dividing families more than usual?
Yeah, so of course there's still all of the behind the scenes stuff that always existed, you know, all sorts of conflict about things like in-laws and money and all of that stuff. But I think that over the last few years, what I've noticed become really challenging are a few things. One is just the navigation of stress. I think that families are having to learn new ways to navigate stress that they didn't necessarily see modeled to them in the past. Definitely gender roles is a huge thing that comes up, and no one really wants to talk about it. You know, my couples come in and they believe themselves to be these really kind of equitable partners. Like, of course I love my wife and I want her to succeed. And of course I don't care if my husband doesn't make as much money as I make. But then, you know, it comes out that actually these things under the surface are kind of causing them challenges, whether it's with mental load disparities or wondering about like their own identity. Like, am I really a man if I'm not making as much money as my partner? Or if I step back to do more of the childcare and I let my partner succeed at work? Am I really a good mother if I'm not at home all of the time? And so those are some of the things that I find are coming up that when I was working with couples 10 years ago, they weren't talked about as much. And it was more, you know, I'm here because there's been an affair, or I'm here because we get into horrible, horrible fights. But now it's like, who are we? Who do we want to be? And why are we annoyed with each other, even though we actually really like each other and think we're on the same page?
That is so true. Yeah, and like you said, 10 years ago when I was working with couples as well, it was a lot more affairs. It was a lot more money. It was a lot more, stress over we don't have enough time together. And it has dramatically shifted. One thing I've seen is a lot of very high performing, more professional women who, they would identify themselves as feminists or as just being, I'm just a very productive girl boss kind of situation. And they have this deep shame that they experience in their relationships where they want their husband to step into a masculine leadership role, but she's also ashamed that she wants at the same time. And then she's also afraid to let him do that because she's never experienced a healthy masculine kind of love before either. So women seem pulled apart in this maelstrom of desires and shame at the same time. Have you noticed that women seem to be struggling really badly, just the women personally, with those specific aspects between desire and shame?
Absolutely. And I told you before we started recording that I have a book coming out called Till Stress Do Us Part. And one of the things that we talk about are some of the challenges that men and women are facing. And one of those challenges that women are facing is that a lot of their identity was built around what was modeled, right? So they go into motherhood or marriage or whatever it is, wanting some specific things, but also designing a life that was a little bit different, that is different than what is going to allow that, right? And so there's a lot of kind of identity or role conflict for people where it's like, yes, I still, and this is me, this is who I am, right? I am very successful in my career. And like, yes, I want to be successful in my career and I want to own a business and do speaking opportunities and train people and be a therapist and do all of these things. But I also get really frustrated sometimes when I can't just be home with my kids or I can't just be taken care of. And so there's conflict for even me, right? I think the other piece of this that's really big is that a lot of women are entering into marriages where their partner knows this about them up front and says, I love that about you. I love that you're successful. I want you to be successful. I'll do anything so that you can just be as successful as I am. But then when reality comes into play, men aren't really wanting to step into those roles or they're not knowing what the role is, so they don't do it. And so then what happens is the woman is doing all of these new roles, working outside of the home, navigating financial matters, all of those types of things, but they still are doing the majority of things inside of the home. And so things feel really unequally distributed and unfair.
Right. It's so true that, and I've heard that many times, that women feel like they are doing the vast bulk of work inside and outside. And men, how do I want to say this delicately? There's so many things that we got to talk about today, but the delicacy is there. And I'm not usually one for delicacy, but this topic needs it. Men that I have encountered, and I work with a lot of guys who are, they go out there, conquer the world, face everything, face the dragons for their family. But then when they come home, they don't really know how to connect to their family, right? I worked with a lot of military guys, and they'd say that, the one theater they don't train you for is the home front, because you come home, you can go out there and face any battle, but coming home to your family and connecting with them is the one thing they've never really experienced. So many men, right, the rise of avoidant attachment style going higher and higher as men are learning that they can perform, they can fight, they can face risks, but the emotional intimacy is just dying off in men. And I've noticed, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, is here in America especially, we don't really have a functioning family transmission for the last 100 years. It has been trauma responses. It has been men dying or men checking out or men getting destroyed in some way, and the women holding everything together for about 100 years through every generation. And what seems to be happening is the women have stepped forward into those protective roles for so long that they don't really know how to let men step into those roles anymore. Is that something that you're maybe seeing? And not blaming women, but that women have forgotten how to even relate to men, even as men have forgotten how to relate to women?
I think it's huge. I often think about the fact that our parents, and by our, I mean probably most of the demographic listening to this, were raised by World War II vets, and that we often make fun of the boomers and how emotionally inept they are and like not aware what's going on with their children or their partners or whatever it is. But, I think back to the fact that many of them were either raised by a Holocaust survivor or a World War II vet. And so you are thinking only maybe 1 or 2 generations back in your own family, there was some pretty significant trauma that would have made your parents' parents, or maybe if you're listening, maybe your own parents, emotionally cut off because of trauma. Right? And what does that look like? It looks like substance use in the home. It looks like physical and emotional abuse. It looks like emotional distance. All sorts of things that many, many, many of the boomers were raised with in their lives. And they were told that it was normal, right? We all get hit. We all get ignored. Our mothers are depressed because our mothers have nobody really emotionally taking care of them, maybe financially taking care of them, but maybe not because there's maybe PTSD or whatever going on with their partner. And so our mothers are alone. Our fathers are nuts. This is really like the boomer generation. And therefore our mothers are kind of nuts because they're being abused and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm using nuts with love. But that's what they were raised with. And so then we have that generation of parents, they were not modeled how to be emotionally present with people. They were not modeled how to care about attachment needs. They were just modeled survival and get over it, and we're all suffering and blah, blah, blah. And so now we have millennials who were raised only 1 generation removed from all of those people that had PTSD, really, and their children who probably did because in some ways they were abused, or if not, at least attachment injuries. And we're wondering, like, why are people not able to relate? And I think that a lot of it plays into that. And so a question that you asked is like, why are men so avoidant with their emotions? Well, if only a couple generations ago, and for some people this generation, if they've been deployed, they were at war, and you're taught to turn off your emotions, and then you're modeled that. And so men have been modeled again and again and again. Don't attach, be distant, just caretake, but not caretake in a way that's like emotional, just pay the bills, work, blah, blah, blah. And the women have been told, like you said, they're not going to be here. They're either going to be dead, or they're going to be abusive, or they're going to be drunk, or they're going to be distant. They're not going to be here. So I'm going to provide for myself, whether that means emotionally or financially. And this is only a few generations of that. So of course we have that playing out right now.
Absolutely. And it is so good to talk to a colleague about this who gets it, because when I have this conversation with people, it's hard to explain how the last 100 years has created such an unusual and abnormal and unhealthy survival dynamic, so that when I talk to my executives who come in and say, Adam, I don't think I have attachment problems. I think that I'm just very practical, but my wife claims that I'm not emotionally available, and she's mad at me because our children are all anxious. Help me convince my wife that she is wrong. And I talk to them about this and say, look, buddy, we've been in a survival circumstance for 100 years here in America. We are barely coming out of it, and maybe going into another one. We don't know. It's looking pretty rough. Like, this is not normal, but it feels normal to you because it's all you've ever known. There are so many layers deeper than this. We are barely skimming the surface. We're at level 2 of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety and security. We haven't even begun touching like love and belonging and self-esteem and growth and actualization, all these levels that everybody is missing. The brain chemistry. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Is the brain chemistry that we have, all of us seem to be, many of us are on those cortisol pathways, the cortisol, and then cope with dopamine. Cortisol flood, cope with dopamine. And that's our society right now, right? We have our phones, that little nightmare rectangle that you get to stare into. You can watch society collapse in real time. And when that stresses you out, you could flip to social media and start dopamine binging to cope. And that's what our brains are on. So we're missing so much of the oxytocin bonding that we should be getting. Many of us don't even have that from childhood, so we don't even have that nurturing. The serotonin we should be getting from deeper fulfillment, from conversations like this. You and I are having a great conversation. This is serotonin. Thank you for being here for this. But most people, they watch podcasts because they don't have these conversations in their home. They don't have these conversations in their families. So this listening to you and I talk, this is their social interaction for many people. And that's that they're missing gallons of serotonin in the brain. But those bonding hormones, the brain chemistry, everything has shifted so badly for 100 years. Do you see any signs of turning? Do you see any signs in families of a growing awareness, right? You're working just like I am on the front lines trying to turn this ship. What do you see happening with families? Better, worse?
I see so much awareness. And I think that's why we're even seeing the shift in what we're noticing in couples therapy, at least for me, in couples therapy, is I'm seeing people who 10 years ago wouldn't have come to therapy because they're fine, right? Like, get over it, move forward, we're fine. But now they're coming because they're recognizing that their family could be navigating life in a much better way, that they could be enjoying life, that they, even though things are fine, like I'm seeing a lot of couples, like they're not going to divorce, right? They love each other, but they don't want to be miserable in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s. They know that they have many more years of work left. They know that they have small children, and there are dads, I would say. I think women always wanted to bring their husbands to couples therapy, but I think that men now are saying, yes, I'll go, because there are husbands and dads who want to actually be present fathers, who want to be present, loving husbands. And they don't know how to do it, but they want to do it. And they come in and I can give them feedback. I can say to them, I know that you want to be a great dad, but when you are staying at the office until 9 p.m. and you're not being responsive to your partner when they say, hey, let's go on a date, you are ruining the attachment. You are hurting it and you don't even recognize it. Here's basic things you can do. And I have found that men are like, yes, that's great. Now that you tell me what to do, I can do it. If it's all that I'm doing is that every time my wife tells a story, I look at my phone and you're telling me just put my phone down and I'll listen, and that could make a difference, I will do it. And so that's the difference I'm seeing, is that people might not know what to do, but they want to know what to do. And they will do it.
And this is so true. And I'm laughing because all of the men who come into me for coaching, same thing, right? The message, and maybe this has been a big shift, is the message in the past with therapy, especially, unfortunately, our field, was, look, there's something wrong with you. You need to fix it. And you are hurting other people, especially at men. You are hurting people. You're not a good person. You're not a good partner. Or they were afraid that's what they would hear when they came to a couples coaching. And now we've got, over the last 10 years, we've got the massive shift, Tony Robbins, David Goggins, right, to some extent, Jordan Peterson, making these men understand, okay, look, it's not that there's something bad about you. It's all the opportunity you're leaving on the table. It's all that fulfillment you could be having. You are going to war every day. You're collecting a paycheck. You're bringing it home to your family. And then you sit there feeling miserable and they're unhappy. And there's reasons for this biochemically. There's reasons for this with attachment and behavior. You're not bad, but nobody ever showed you how to get the richness of life. Let us show you what you've been missing. Let us show you that self-improvement. That's what men seem to respond to. And they do, like you said, they come charging forward when you tell them that. And they're like, really? There's more? Like, I can do more? Then they start running in. They start running into the burning building instead of just like watching the building burn because they don't know how to put it out. It's a huge difference.
For sure.
That's great about men.
Huge. Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think a way that therapy has missed the mark for men historically is that it has not put forth enough the fact that there's solutions, and it's seemed very touchy-feely, which isn't really what it's been, but it has allowed itself to be recognized in that way. So what it has seemed like is a feminine endeavor. It seemed like something that, of course, women are going to want to talk about feelings, which is a crazy stereotype anyway. I don't really like talking about feelings. I like talking about solutions. But that we've done a disservice there, because what men feel more confident with is believing that there's going to be a solution and that there are going to be actual tasks. They want to know there's going to be tasks that they can do that will make improvement and that they can measure their success. Does that mean that they also don't benefit from talking about their feelings? Absolutely not. But to get them into the room, there needs to be this feeling of, there's something behind this. You're going to tell me something I can do here. Otherwise, it's just too whooshy.
You're gonna cry. Your wife will cry for 35 minutes, and then you will be yelled at for 15 minutes, and at the end of it, things will be worse. Yeah, no, most guys don't line up to pay for that.
Tell you you're a jerk.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, most guys won't line up for that. But when you say, look, and like it sounds like you and I both do. Look, there are reasons this is happening. Here's what you've been missing. Here's how to make it happen. Here's how it's measurable. Here's what to expect. Let's help recruit both of you to the same side. Let's make this very simple. Do these 5 things, come back, report this. Here's how we're going to troubleshoot it. Men line up. Men will pay just about any amount of money for that kind of solution, which is incredible, because the stereotype about men for all these years has been they don't care about relationships. They won't invest in relationships. Oh, men will invest everything when it's measurable, when it makes proper sense to them. I love that. Speaking of investment, this was something I wanted to pick your brain about, because I saw on your Instagram feed you were talking about this, and I'm a huge advocate for this, is premarital work that couples can be doing beforehand, right? So they don't necessarily end up and you're in my office on the last ditch effort, Hail Mary sort of pass, Elizabeth, Adam, can you guys fix us please before it detonates? Premarital. What is the number one thing that you think couples should be talking about before they tie the knot, before they walk down the aisle? What is the number one conversation, if you had to give them one thing that they should be talking about beforehand?
It's different than what the Catholic Church would tell them.
Okay.
I think that they should be talking about how they will navigate problems together, and not spend so much time talking about how many kids they want to have or how they want to divide finances or any of that. Those things give us a false sense of confidence, in my opinion. As a married person and as someone who's worked with a lot of married people, you change your mind a million times in life. You're going to be married to this person for a long time. And I think that, of course, before you get married, it's lovely to say, how do we want to start off? How do we want to divide finances? And what are you thinking as the timeline of kids? Of course. And you need to talk about that again a year later and again 2 years later and all of the time. But what you really need to understand is this a person who can manage stress and is able to have conversations when stressful things happen? So if we decide we want 3 kids, but we find out that we cannot get pregnant, is this a person who is going to be able to have a conversation and negotiate and move forward? When we decide that we want to save X amount of money every single year and then you lose your job, is this a person who's going to be able to say, we wanted to save this money, but you know what? I lost my job, or you have to get cancer treatments and we're not going to save the money because we're going to put it towards that. So to me, if you're going to talk about anything, it's to talk about, who are you as a person when life is hard? And what do we agree on? How do we agree to talk about things so that we stay on each other's team?
I love this so much. There was a fantastic book I read called The Co-Founder's Handbook by Tanis George. And she lays out such a detailed structure for building a co-founding relationship. And at the time that I read it, I thought it was astounding, because marriage, really the only other relationship in the world that's quite like it, is co-founding a business together. Anything else, it doesn't quite track. But if you're going to marry somebody, you had better set it up as if you are building the business that will carry through the absolute rest of your life. And so what do you do in a business? Well, yeah, okay, you make sure that you want to start the same kind of business. Okay, we want to build an Italian restaurant. Cool. Well, okay, one of us isn't Italian and the other one's not building a hot dog cart, right? Okay, we want the same restaurant, but But and I, one of my dearest friends in the world is a genius when it comes to business. And I remember he sat me down and said, Adam, when you start a business, you don't plan for when things are going to go right. You start immediately with plans for what will happen when things go wrong. If you are building a co-founding relationship, you don't build a contract that talks about how everything's going to be perfect. You build a contract around what could go wrong. You build a contract that tells you, this is how we'll handle disputes. This is what will happen if we want to break up, if we want to split, what will happen, right? The contract for when things go wrong. When you have that in place, you can keep coming back to it, and that can guide you forward. Do that first. What will go wrong? Most couples don't want to think about that. It is so unromantic. No. It is unromantic to imagine that we won't always be this in love, and we won't always be gazing into each other's eyes, talking about how happy we are. But you know what? Are you married, Elizabeth? Are you married yourself? I think you are.
I am, yes.
Beautiful.
I am.
How long?
9 years.
Ooh, good for you. So I'm also married 15 years. I got 5 kids. The 5th one was just born. We live on a farm, and I have to travel extensively for business. When we first got married, I worked very close to home. It was very different. We obviously had no kids. Things have changed dramatically. My career has changed about 3 times since we got married. She was running a business at one point, very much extensively running a business, making more money than I was making, and then helped me go through grad school. Now she's stay-at-home mom with 5 kids. Massive levels of change. Let me tell the couples out there, romance is nice, but at the end of the day, just like Elizabeth has said, you need to plan for what's going to happen when things go wrong. What's going to happen when things are challenging? How will you have those talks? Would your partner even sit still for that talk? Or are they going to dive out the window when you start trying to talk to them about money or about what's going to be, hey, one of us has had cancer. What will be different in our sex life? How will we handle that, right? Elizabeth, you couldn't have said, that was fantastic. I love that piece. What will go wrong? That is great. What is a second thing that you want couples to start talking about? If not right now before they get married, then talk about it right now after you're married. Have a conversation immediately after this podcast. What's the thing that you think they should leap into right now?
Well, that's a good question. I think that any of the cliches can be important. Like, how do you like to be loved? How do you like to be communicated with? One thing that, especially with women and men, if we're talking about those differences, is there's different ways that they like to be communicated with. And sometimes a conflict can start just because of that difference, even though nothing conflictual was actually happening. I see it all the time on this couch where they will be saying, I'm sure you see it. I'm like, you're saying the same thing. Why are you arguing right now? What is happening? But it's because there's 2 different ways of communicating. Some people are solution coaches and some people are emotion coaches. And what that means is that some people go into a conversation and they're like, great, there's a problem. What are we doing to solve it? This doesn't mean that they don't love you, that they're trying to dismiss you, that they think you're an idiot, that can't solve their own problems. But for an emotion coach, those things that I just said, that's what it feels like. It feels like I'm trying to talk to you about the problem and the way it's making me feel and my worries, and all your solutions are making me feel like you're not listening, I'm annoying you, I'm an idiot, da 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 da. So you have to figure out, what is your communication style? If your partner is somebody who tends to jump to solutions, instead of getting angry with them, look at it as a helpful thing. I know you like to help me think through things. I appreciate that. Can you meet me in the middle and talk about my feelings first, and then let's do solutions? If your partner is an emotion coach, that might be very irritating to you. You might think, how long are we going to sit and talk about this? I get it. You're sad. You're tired. You're annoyed. I want to fix it. I'm tired of hearing about what you're feeling. Let me fix it. But if you could learn to meet in the middle and value this communication style and say, I can sit with feelings for a moment. I can even share my own. Then what you're going to find is that the other person will be more willing to hear your solutions. So I always say to people, figure it out. Like, who's the emotion coach here and who's the solution coach? And these things can change. So pay attention in the conversation. If you're getting irritated, oh, my partner is being an emotion coach right now, I'm being solution. What if I just stuck with those emotions? So that's one thing that I would tell people to talk about.
I love that. No, I love this so much because so my specialty has been attachment, obviously. So I mostly get men come in who have avoidant behavior patterns, and often women who have or have had anxious behavior patterns. And now they're a bit more frustrated and resentful, so it's starting to come out and they're pushing a bit harder. They're not just classical anxious, but there is very much the emphasis on emotions and validation of emotions. And then typically the men, not always, but typically the men, the focus on let's get through this, let's solve it, solve it, solve it. And that is exactly the dynamic. So many of these avoidant men, and one thing that I help the women understand is your emotions are a huge risk to him. Your emotions are the terror. They are the fear because he sees you becoming emotional and he sees that your reason, it seems like to him, decreases your reasoning. So you are now unstable. And now there is a fear that he is going to lose you. So the reason he shuts down your emotions is to try to protect the relationship. And then he thinks he can just make you happy later to try to compensate, right? So your feelings are making him afraid and he's trying to protect both of you by shutting them down. That is his mechanism of love and care for you. We're going to fix that, but recognize, number one, that's where he's coming from. Then I look at the guys and I say, look, do you know what happens when somebody has emotions? Do you know what their brain does? And the guys say, what do you mean? And I say, well, okay, brain scans that we've seen, especially like EMDR therapists see this, right? Brain scans show that when you become emotionally agitated, it actually decreases some of that logical brain functioning, and it creates almost like an inflammation effect on the emotional side brain. So they are more emotional and less reasonable, men and women both. So when that's happening, if you try to come in with logic and say, here's why you shouldn't be having that feeling. Here's why I'm not going to care or respond to your feeling. It's going to just slap them in the face. What you need to do first, you don't even have to say that feeling is right. Just say, I hear where you're at. I recognize that you're upset. And the fact that you are feeling it is the problem. So let's help you with that. And let's deal with the fact that you are having that feeling. Let's find a solution to that, right? That validation. That emotional brain comes way down. Logical functioning is restored. They actually feel some oxytocin with you because they feel like you care, because you do. And then they're ready to do that work. So then they can step into the logical side. And the guys at this point look at their wife like, does that really work? And she's like, yes, I've been telling you this for 10 years. Just tell me you care. Right. They're astounded. So when the man starts like understanding how to just care for her feelings, and he doesn't even have to collapse into them, just care for them. And then give her that connection. She is happy to go with him into the solution focus. She's happy to do that because that is what she wants too. But she doesn't want to feel like she doesn't matter to him. She doesn't want to be slapped in the face, obviously. And then once they both work on the solutions, right, the vasopressin bonding comes in from reducing the stress. The oxytocin bonding comes in. This is why I tell couples when at the beginning I say, look, you love each other, but your brains don't like each other right now because you have a cortisol association. We're going to fix that. Yeah. We're going to make your brains like each other by showing you how you can work together as a couple. After a few sessions, they like each other again. And it's phenomenal. It's a great change. It sounds like you're seeing very much the same thing on your end when people learn to take care of feelings and find solutions together.
Absolutely. And just like you were saying, one of the biggest aha moments, I think, for couples is that when they are in an unsafe brain and body, cortisol, all of the stress hormones, that they cannot be relational. Like I tell them both that you are not being relational right now because you do not feel safe. So even the anxious person, I tell them the same thing. Your partner is throwing these solutions for the same reason you're throwing all of these emotions. They don't feel safe. And so whoever has the wherewithal, whoever's the least flooded, if you can do anything to make that person feel safe, even that anxious partner, if they can move towards and say, look, I promise we're going to get, I will solve this with you. I just need to be able to talk about this. That helps the other person to know they're safe, right? I love that so much. If the only word you can remember is safe as a piece of change, then yeah, if you can remember safety, then that is huge. My partner and I aren't getting along right now because they feel unsafe. How do I make them feel safe? You can talk to me about your feelings. I'm not going to dismiss them or turn against them or whatever. Talk to me. That's making them feel safe. My partner keeps shutting me down and stonewalling, and they're talking about solutions, and they're telling me my emotions are stupid. They're not feeling safe. How do I help them to feel safe? And this is a team effort, and you're going to do it back and forth all of the time. But if your brain does not feel safe, you cannot be relational. You actually literally lose the ability to have a sense of humor, to show affection, to problem solve, to be curious. So nothing good is happening in there that is going to help your relationship. You're primed to battle. So just going off of what you said, the most important thing is we've got to help each other feel safe.
Absolutely. I love that so much. Now, is that all of that is going to be present in your new book? Is that right?
It is, yes. So I talk about how when we are triggered, we have cortisol pumping through our bodies. I talk about how as a society, we are overdoing eustress, which is the good stress. And we are trying to get dopamine hits all of the time by doing things like renovating our houses, taking too many vacations, spending too much money, just doing all sorts of crap, including paying attention to our phones all the time so that we don't actually have to reduce and face the distressing stress in our lives. And then I talk about how to get away from all of that and navigate life and stress together so that you're not at each other's throats.
What are the top 2 outcomes people are going to get when they read your book? What can they expect?
One, you can expect to understand all of these things, many of the things that we've been talking about. I think that a lot of people, once they have the science behind it and the research behind it, it becomes much more simple to recognize it in your own life and to make changes. I think if you don't understand why you're fighting so much or why things are causing problems, then it's hard to make changes. But if you can say, look, we are living under extreme stress, either stress from outside of our relationship, stress from society, stress from inside of our relationship. And there is an actual reason that because of that stress, we are not being relational. We are not responding to each other's attachment needs. Then you depersonalize it. You say, this is just science. And then the second thing that you're going to get is strategies. So understanding what can we do to combat all of this stress so that we don't destroy our relationships instead of what we're currently doing.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Thank you so much. I want everybody on the internet to find you immediately so that we could save as many marriages as possible. I think there's billions of marriages out there right now that need you and I think there's more than enough to go around for you and I. So where can people find you, and how can they start working with you or get everything that you need them to hear so they can save their marriage?
Yeah, so there's a couple places you can find me. I own a practice. We are multi-state, so we're in many states, called A Better Life Therapy. So www.abetterlifetherapy.com, not to be confused with BetterHelp. And I also have a book coming out, as we mentioned, called Till Stress Do Us Part, which you can find anywhere. You can find me on my website, ElizabethEarnshaw.com, just my name, or on Instagram at Liz Listens.
I love your Instagram, by the way. Everybody should check you out immediately. Great stuff over there. Good reels. Very informative. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you. Do you have one last nugget of truth for anybody out there waiting and wondering, is this for me? Can my marriage be fixed? Any last wrap up for them?
Yeah, I think many marriages can be fixed as long as you have a willingness to change. And a lot of people don't like to hear that. So that is my nugget of truth. And your willingness has to come before the other person does anything. You can't say, I'll change when they change. You have to say, I'm willing to start making changes right now in my own behavior, and things can start to improve. Maybe if the other person is also going to do the dance with you.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you. For everybody at home, This was I Wish You Knew. Make sure you follow us on social media. I am your host, Adam Lane Smith. You can find me on adamlanesmith.com with my coaching, with all of my products on there, all my courses, everything you need to repair your relationships. I'm also at Attachment Adam on Instagram. Check me out. Other than that, I will see you in the next episode.